Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. The old lady of Threadneedle Street. She's been there since the 17th century. You don't know what I'm talking about? That's the name in the city and in the financial markets for the Bank of England. Yep, been there since the 1690s, and I guess has had a reputation as being rock solid, utterly reliable. And yet, over the contentious Brexit debate, there are many of us that have fallen out of love with the old lady in quite a big way. Because during that referendum campaign, Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, who came to us from Canada, and bear in mind that the Governor is supposed to be politically neutral and thoroughly independent, gave us a series of warnings during that referendum about what would happen to the economy, what would happen to the property market, what would happen to consumer confidence, what would happen to the City of London. And I'm quite pleased to say that over the course of the last few months, the bank have admitted that simply they got it wrong. Andy Haldane, who's the senior economist at the bank, had the decency to say, if you look at how the consumer markets performed during the course of last year, it's as though the referendum had never taken place. It's business as usual. Well, I have been pretty fiercely critical of Mark Carney and the bank, and I was during the referendum campaign. And Jacob Rees-Mogg, just a few days ago, had this to say about the Bank of England.
He said before the Brexit vote took place, there would be a sharp downturn in the economy because of Brexit. He had a panic interest rate cut that was completely unnecessary and helped push the pound down further than it would otherwise have gone. Mark Carney is one of the enemies of Brexit. He has opposed it consistently.
An enemy of Brexit, there we are. But actually what Jacob said there was right, because had we voted to leave, George Osborne had promised us, if you remember, an emergency budget. He, I'm pleased to say, was out of the door shortly after Cameron. But it was the Governor of Bank of England, Mark Carney, that reduced interest rates in the wake of the result, and that actually is more than anything what led to a very sharp fall in the value of the pound. I mean, I'm not overly vexed about the pound being down, but he did do that. And this, in some ways, has led to an even bigger debate, not just about the Bank of England, but about all sorts of organisations that keep lining up and predicting our doom and gloom. And I think Michael Gove, when he was interviewed on Sky News during the Brexit campaign, this was his comment about experts.
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts with organisations from acronyms.
The people of this country have had enough of experts.
From organisations with acronyms saying that they know what is best and getting it consistently wrong.
Oh, I love it. That's a great clip. Whatever side of the debate you're on, that is probably Michael Gove's greatest ever hit. Had enough of experts. Had enough of organisations funded by government and funded by the European Union and goodness knows who telling us our doom. Well, our friends in Threadneedle Street have been at it again today. Having learnt nothing from their predictions of last year, they are now telling us that 75,000 jobs in finance could go as a result of Brexit, and that they reckon 10,000 jobs will go pretty much immediately. Given their abysmal recent track record, do you believe them? And if you think absolutely we should listen to every word that comes from Threadneedle Street, then call me on 0345 6060 973. If, like me, you are deeply sceptical and think it might be better if they kept their silence for a bit, then of course you can text to 84850. You can tell us more or less whatever you think by using the hashtag Farage and LBC and tweeting at LBC. And you can watch the show live on Facebook from here in the LBC studio in London and comment there too. Gary from Tamworth, do you believe that we're about to lose 75,000 jobs in the city if Brexit goes ahead?
Hello, Nigel. Great to talk to you. Well, considering they've got an 100% record of failure on everything that they've ever said in the past.
Well, recently, Gary, yes, I'd agree.
I mean, they didn't even spot the crash coming. Me and my mate, who haven't got an O-level between us, we've been talking about it from about 2003.
Yep.
Saying that there's got to be a crash soon. We were just surprised how long it took. But the Bank of England didn't see it coming. They were surprised.
Right. So, Gary, do we just ignore this warning today?
I should think so, yeah. Everything else they've said has been...
All right. Couldn't be more succinct, couldn't be clearer. Gary says 100% track record of failure, and they didn't even spot the crash from coming. And Gary's right about that. However, up until the late 1990s, it was the Bank of England that actually had control over the banking and lending industry in this country. And one of the genius things that Gordon Brown did as Chancellor of the Exchequer was to take that power away from them and give it to a bunch of tick-box bureaucrats based in Canary Wharf. And Gary is right, they didn't predict the crash coming, but in many ways, the ability to look after our lending market had passed from them to elsewhere. Jim is calling, a new caller to the show from Nottingham. Jim, good evening. Should we be worried?
Not at all. Just to say to you, Nigel, your show's brilliant. I saw you when you came to a town called Bulwell in Nottingham.
I remember it.
Yeah, you came in the Royal Oak for a pint, I know that.
Well, that's almost certainly true, yes. Go on.
But just to give you one little bit of a thought, can you remember Cyril Fletcher? The great Cyril Fletcher was a humorist who was on the radio and television.
He used to appear with Esther Ranson on television when I was quite young. Would that be right?
He certainly did.
Yep.
And he always described an expert as X meaning was and spurt as in drip.
Right, okay.
That's what he called an expert, and I think the Bank of England and all the rest of them, Michael Gove was exactly right. Experts, rubbish. Well done, Nigel. Keep the show going.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Nice testimonial and another deep cynic when it comes to experts. Hi, Nigel. Bankers are no concern of mine. I did not vote Brexit for the benefit of bankers, says Tony. Well, you know what, Tony? Let's just have a little think about bankers. This word bankers that we now tend to use for the whole of the financial services industry. There are about 1 million people working in London in the financial services industry. And that does not mean just banking, Tony, because there are people involved in the foreign exchange markets. There are people buying and selling all sorts of things, commodities. Indeed, that's what I did for 20 years. I was involved in the buying and selling of base metals. So just to call everybody in financial services bankers is wrong. There's the insurance business, there's the pensions industry, and there's 1 million jobs in London, and there's over 1 million jobs in this out there around the rest of the country. And any of you, the nearest town or city to where you are, you will see many hundreds of people employed working in insurance offices or whatever it is. It is Britain's biggest industry. You know, it does contribute a huge amount to the Exchequer. It matters. But, you know, it's interesting. And it's the BBC that ran this story right from the beginning of the day. But even Carmel Ahmed, who is the BBC's economics editor, said, do you know, it's interesting, even if London did lose, even if this was right, even if London did lose 75,000 jobs, it would still be the biggest financial services industry in Europe and one of the leading places in the world. I don't believe those jobs would be lost. I heard all of this back in 2000 when we were told, even the Law Bearer of London said to us, if we don't join the euro, the City of London is doomed, investment will cease, the banks will leave, and the reality, of course, is there is more business conducted in euros every day in London than in every other European centre added up together. So I've heard all this nonsense before. Michael is calling from Bromley. Michael, good evening.
Yeah, hi, Nigel. I believe that there will be a little impact, but I don't believe it'll be any big impact like 70,000 jobs. I don't.
No, Michael, do you know what? There will be some impact. I'll tell you why. Because we're leaving the European Union, there will be banks that have got big HQs in London that will think, actually, we need to have a bit more of a footprint within the European Union itself. So I do accept that. But that isn't necessarily to the detriment of London, because surely the advantage, Michael, that London may have is that we've got the chance to open ourselves up to have easier relationships with the rest of the world.
Yes, I believe that will be the case. And I believe that it'll only be the London Clearing House and certain investment banks, because we must do remember is that London raises 60% of all investment into Europe. So that is a major key for Europe.
This is a very key point, Michael, you raise. One of the voices that I've heard over the course of the last few months in Brussels is that actually, in many ways, the institutions in Europe need the City of London very, very badly as a place to raise money and as a place to do business. And it all leads me, Michael, to think that even if we're not members of the European Union, even if we haven't got the EU passport, there is something called equivalence, which means that our financial centre, our rules, our means of doing business are pretty much equivalent to what's going on in the European Union. And I reckon, Michael, whatever Juncker and Monsieur Barnier, and I'll talk about him again a bit more in a moment, but whatever they say, ultimately, I think businesses are going to say, do you know what? We need to come to a common sense deal, because London wants a strong City of London, and we need the City of London to raise cash. So actually, Michael, I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah, the same here. And also as well, Nigel, the devaluation of the pound will help, because if we do lose the city passport in service, and I used to work at the city, I currently trade the stock market myself.
Okay.
If we do lose that passport, that will be derived from, that will cause another decline in the pound. And if we have another decline in the pound, the loss of the passport in services will be replaced by a boost in exports and foreign investment coming into Britain. So the equilibrium kind of brings it back to the central stance, it does.
Yeah, no, Michael, I understand that. The pound falling puts a few prices up, but is very good for Britain's export industries. Michael, tell me, as someone trading the stock markets, we see the Dow Jones over 23,000, the FTSE, well up there. Where do you think the stock markets are going, Michael?
I believe that this is where it comes in with the Bank of England, because I believe that we have got a crash coming, but it will come in the form of an interest rates going up. But this is why the Bank of England and the Brexit stance is a bit of a bad grey area, because we don't want the Bank of England using the inflation to raise interest rates major, which in return will cause the debt bubble crashing, and then in one trigger, Brexit is linked to the debt bubble.
Yeah, no, I get that.
In Britain,
the stock market goes down after a record rally and everyone blames Brexit. Yeah, that's my fear, Michael, too. I thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. As the Bank of England predict more doom and gloom because of Brexit and perhaps another 75,000 jobs to leave the City of London, I'm asking you whether you believe them. Gosh, I'm being met with an absolute wave of scepticism. Experts like professors can be hard to say anything you want. Same with statistics. You can tweet them to support any agenda, says Harry to me via Twitter. I believe it's another case of overreaction to Brexit that will be happening no matter what. Appropriate, I think, for Halloween, says Ian. More Project Fear from Osborne's man at the bank, says Tom. No one takes any notice of the Bank of England except other astrologers, says Richard. And on and on and on. Surely there's someone out there. Please. Perhaps you work for the Bank of England. If you want, you can ring in using anonymity. Tell us that actually, despite the fact you got everything completely wrong last year, that this year, this prediction is going to be right. I'm all ears. Happy to listen to you. And I mentioned before the break Michel Barnier, who, of course, is in charge of the Brexit negotiations. And if you listened at the show last night, you'll know that after Lord Adonis, Nick Clegg, and of all people, Ken Clarke, bowled up at the European Commission yesterday to have a meeting with Monsieur Barnier, I decided to send him a letter. Go to lbc.co.uk, see the letter I've written to Monsieur Barnier. I've demanded a meeting. I've had enough of him seeing all these people that want to stop Brexit, delay Brexit. It's about time someone spoke to him who understands what the 17.4 million people who voted Brexit really meant. And I want people just to get on with this. But back to the Bank of England and their forecast. Alex is a new caller to the show and is calling from Queen's Park. Good evening, Alex.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call.
So, come on, are they right, Alex?
Well, the thing is, I just wanted to, I wanted to comment on a point you made. I agree with you that, no agency, no matter how well funded or well staffed, can predict with great accuracy economic outcomes. I'm a banker, a proper investment banker.
Yep.
Here in London, and we make use of that data, and it's very often wrong. But at the end of the day, what other alternatives are there? I mean, I would rather listen to an organization who's staffed with people who maybe studied, who were trained or versed in a particular field, i.e. international policy, international economics. Because who else can we listen to?
Well, Alex, that's a very fair point. But let me put this back to you, that we've been told that the Bank of England is thoroughly independent. We've been told that the Bank of England doesn't engage in politics, and yet I put it to you, Alex, that in the referendum, it appeared that Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, and George Osborne, the then, I'm pleased to say not now, Chancellor of the Exchequer, were acting in tandem, and it looked to me, and I think Jacob Rees-Mogg thinks this too, that they were behaving not just in an economic capacity, but in an overtly political way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, the thing is, I'm just a man of numbers, so I don't get involved in politics. But I think if decisions were swayed by politics, then I don't think it's right. I'll tell you what, from my standpoint. So I'm from the States, and I moved to London, and there's this notion that bankers, if they'll just move wherever capital is thrown, the more capital is thrown at them. But to be perfectly honest, a lot of my friends who are also bankers like myself from outside the UK, we are here because we love the UK. We like the schools, we like the openness, and just because Frankfurt may dangle carrots doesn't mean. I mean, I don't see myself leaving London.
No, Alex, that's very interesting because yeah, as you say, actually, schools, I know for the Japanese, access to play golf, which is a very difficult thing to do back in Tokyo. There's a whole host of factors as to why London is still the number one location for people like you in investment banking in terms of where they want to live and where they want to work. And I was amused, Alex. I mean, last week we talked a little bit about Michael Bloomberg saying Brexit's a terrible thing, but hey, here's my £1 billion new building next to Mansion House, and I want to employ 4,000 more staff. And similarly, Lloyd Blankfein, the boss of Goldman Sachs, saying, well, maybe people will go to Frankfurt, and yet they're currently building a new HQ. So, Alex, do you see yourself still being here in London, enjoying the lifestyle and the income post-Brexit?
Yeah, I'm staying here, irrespective.
Irrespective. Excellent. Very, very pleased to hear you have that call, and I thank you. And what Alex says is right. When it comes to people who trade money, one person can literally press a button, transfer their money to Zurich, move to Zurich and trade from there. But when it comes to big companies that have customers, you've also got lawyers, you've also got accountants, you've also got the whole infrastructure network here in London established, and Paris and Frankfurt simply cannot compete with that at all. Christopher says to me, can all these people be wrong, Nigel? Do you know, Christopher, I asked myself that question in October 1990 when every single trade union, big business, newspaper, politician all said pegging us to the Deutschmark, joining the exchange rate mechanism was right, and I thought it was wrong. And people then said to me, when I was, I suppose, to be fair, banging on about it a fair bit, surely, Nigel, all these people can't be wrong. And one thing I've learnt, Christopher, is when you get a consensus amongst people of a similar background and a similar type, very often that consensus, Christopher, yes, is completely and utterly wrong. Ben says, JRM for Chancellor, Jacob Rees-Mogg for Chancellor. Well, what about Jacob Rees-Mogg as the next Governor of the Bank of England? That's not a bad idea, is it? I bet he'd love it. Henry is calling me from Cambridge. Henry, good evening.
Good evening. I was just thinking that when we have left the EU, we'll actually get more jobs in London because we'll be able to get rid of a lot of this very damaging EU regulation, because it's very clear which direction the EU is going in. It's clamping down, it's regulating more. We will be able to become a sort of giant Singapore, just without banning chewing gum and spitting.
Do you know, Henry, you are speaking my language. I couldn't believe in 2010 when the Conservative-led government, albeit in coalition with the Lib Dems, opted and voted for financial services, our biggest industry, to come completely under the control of European institutions. And we've not been running, Henry, our biggest industry. We've accepted rules handed down. And you know something? Tens of thousands of jobs have been lost in the city, lost in the hedge fund industry, lost in parts of the insurance or at least reinsurance world, directly as a result of EU regulation. The EU's regulatory framework has been driving jobs out of London over the course of the last few years. And Henry, I am not advocating some sort of Wild West laissez-faire system, but I am advocating sensible regulation, competitive regulation, and I think we could become even bigger in London than we are. You know, I was there for 20 years, Henry. I realised when I was there that London was not a European financial capital, it was a global financial capital. But do you think, Henry, that anybody in the British government would have the wit to actually do what you say?
I think I'm not sure. I'll wait and see. I think there are some people who maybe want to, but are nervous for political reasons about doing it.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You know, Brexit gives us all sorts of amazing global opportunities, but it doesn't happen automatically. It only happens if we make it happen. But Henry in Cambridge, extremely good point. If a monkey were to toss a coin for yes or no to Mr. Carney's last 10 economic predictions, he probably would have done 50% better than Mr. Carney, says Richard from Leicester. I'll believe it when I see it, Nigel. These experts seem to agree with the worst-case scenario each time, then exaggerate that even more. Their forecasts always seem to be wrong. Where is the Brexit recession, says Matthew from Cambridge. Barry says, Brexit is not just about economics, it's about running our own affairs, being independent. Quite right, Barry. Couldn't agree more. Peter says, sounds like the same press which said aeroplanes will be grounded for 12 hours. This is talk that the day after we leave the European Union, there may be no aeroplanes coming in or leaving the country. Sounds about as likely to me as the millennium bug bringing down Western global civilization. Nathaniel is my next caller from Dover in Kent. Nathaniel, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I'm going to be a bit of a surprise to you. Shock horror, would you believe? I am a left-wing Remainer who can hold a debate. So I'm going to shock you tonight.
Right. Go on. The floor is yours. You're on LBC, Nathaniel. Go for it.
Well, the shock horror is, yes, I voted Remain. Yes, I'd vote it again. But you know what? These people are scaremongering. Even I know it when you see it, right? These people, it comes across like, it's funny timing, isn't it? Because the government has been in the news, I'm in an RN, not committing to no deal or deal. All of a sudden, the Bank of England come out with this. It comes across as a bit scaremongery to me. Even I, as a someone who voted Remain and supports Europe, can see it. Let's look at it this way. 192 countries in the world.
Yep.
Do we only trade with Europe? No. How close are we to Wall Street? How close are we to the Japanese market? How close are we to the other markets across the world compared to the European Union? I'd say we're actually closer to Wall Street than we are the European Union.
Nathaniel, if you'd been on the Leave side, we'd have won by a bigger margin. You're making all the arguments for us.
But on a serious note, I mean, I think there will be some. I don't think there'll be nowhere near 75,000. That's the population of Canterbury, right? Well, I think there will be a handful. I think there will be more in the thousands rather than the tens of thousands. Short term,
Nathaniel, some people will move to other European centres because we've left the European Union and people will want a base inside it. But if we play our cards right on the world stage, they will more than be replaced in a short piece of time. Fabulous call from Nathaniel. Loved every second of it. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. The Bank of England are up to our old tricks, telling us that Brexit's going to be a disaster. I'm asking you whether you believe their prediction that up to 75,000 jobs could be lost in the city, and so far, virtually none of you think they're right. Even the investment banker, the American investment banker that rang me, said whatever happens, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death us do part, his working life was going to remain in London. So please, 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 if you think the Bank of England are right, do call 0345 6060 973. And we've been talking about the prospect of jobs being lost. Howard says on Facebook, what about the new jobs that would come to the city because of Brexit? And yeah, if we get our regulations right and our structure right, they could. But somewhere else where new jobs are being created as a direct result of Brexit. How about this? Press Association report today that David Davis has said that already the government have employed 3,000 people to work on Brexit and are expected to employ another 5,000 people. That's an extra 8,000 people the government are taking on to deal with Brexit. Let's hope they've employed the right people. And you'll have noticed in the last couple of weeks I've talked a fair bit, not just of an evening, but on the Sunday mornings too, about our universities, about the fact that I genuinely do not think that we're having a proper even-handed debate in British universities, and a story out this morning that Sussex University's student union has told a new society that's been set up at Sussex that is called the Free Speech Society. And they invited a UKIP MEP, Bill Etheridge, from the West Midlands, to come along and give a talk about free speech. But the student union at Sussex have adjudged that Mr. Etheridge's speech represents a medium to high risk. And as a result of that, have insisted that his speech that he intends to give there is vetted beforehand. Effectively, no platforming a UKIP MEP from Sussex University. And this is happening. It's going on in universities all over the UK and in many parts of America too. And it is loathsome, but it's also dangerous. It effectively is saying that one side of an argument is so unacceptable it shouldn't even be allowed within a university campus. I hate it, and this is something that really does have to be fought. Back to Mark Carney, back to the Bank of England, straight down to Tunbridge in Kent to speak to Ben. Are the bank right to say there may be a problem?
Yes, they are, Nigel. And as always, you never fail to amaze in trying to propagate your misguided opinion on what is fact.
What is fact, Ben? What is fact, Ben, is the bank's predictions in the run-up to Brexit were abysmally wrong.
Let me finish, okay? Because I can give you facts, because I work in the city. I've worked in the city for the last 20 years. I work for an investment bank. My job is moving to Europe.
Wow.
Okay, so I work for a team of 5 people, 5 permanent members of staff. Of those 5, 3 of us, our jobs have been moved to Europe. Now, secondly, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you're listening, but Nick Ferrari had the head of RBS on, who also admitted that RBS were moving a reasonable proportion of their jobs to Amsterdam. Every single major investment bank in the city is doing this, okay? So therefore, the Bank of England, maybe 75,000 might be the highest end, but there is a significant number of jobs that are being moved. Now, I could either move to Europe with my job, or try and put my head above the parapet and try and get another job paying equally in London. I'm a bit scared about doing that, so I've taken the option.
Mm-hmm.
And to say my third point, when I heard you say earlier, oh, well, I've read about this. So, yeah, 75,000 jobs go. London will still be the biggest financial centre in the world, effectively. Fine. That's still 75,000 jobs. 75,000 families, potentially, that are going to lose. And for you to sit there and say, oh, no, this is not a problem, this is fine. You're living in our cuckoo land.
Well, Ben, just 1 second. Twice so far on this show, I have said that some banking jobs will move to Europe because we're leaving the European Union, and those big banks who've got mega headquarters in London will want to make sure they've got good representation inside the European Union with people who've got investment banking skills. So, Ben, I've said that twice. Now, I've now said it 3 times on this show. So, yes, there will be some people that relocate from banking to the rest of the EU. But the opportunity that we have with Brexit to have competitive regulations, to have an attractive place for people to come to that is genuinely global in perspective, far outweighs that in terms of our potential for the financial services industry. And Ben, that's my argument.
Okay, my argument is also, for the last 30 years, the government, every single government, has sold the UK as a fantastic place for investment, a fantastic place to do business. I didn't agree with going into the euro. We didn't go into the euro.
Thank goodness, yeah.
We benefited from that because we have access to the single market. We have everything. Now, do you really think, also because I heard you mention that the amount of euro-denominated trades that go through the City of London is more than Frankfurt, Paris, Madrid, Milan, or wherever put together?
Yes.
Do you really think the EU are not, because they already tried to do it, but when we were a member of the EU or at the top of the table, they weren't allowed to, by the European Court of Justice, I believe, which is one of the things that you all complain about. Do you really think when we come out of the EU, they're not going to move all that billions of pounds of trade settlement that goes on every single day into their own area?
They will want to, Ben. They will want to, as they wanted to when Britain joined the euro, and there will be a fight over it. But ultimately, it's the consumer that decides, it's the market that decides, and if they were to take that away, a new clearing facility would develop. And Ben, I just want to tell you this one last thing, because I spent, like you, I spent 20 years working in the city, and I've now been in politics for almost 20 years, and there was a small overlap in the middle, and I'm not that old, but I can tell you, Ben, that the whole mentality in the European institutions is they hate the City of London, they loathe the Anglo-Saxon culture of London and New York, and they'll be happy to see anything done to it that would damage it and drag it down. And we're breaking free from an organisation that has never intended the city any good at all. And Ben, I really, really mean that.
One final analogy that I've always thought: if you play in a football team, okay, I don't know if you support. I always think about this with Ian Dale because he's a pro-Brexiteer.
Yeah, my family support Crystal Palace, so we better keep quiet on that one, really.
Well, I'm a Crystal Palace fan. So
well, there we go. Okay.
Imagine you've got Will Starr, and he decides, I don't want to play with the team anymore, and he goes and kicks the ball on his own. Is he going to play well? No. But when he plays with the team, he plays better. It may not be the best team in the world, and trust me, at the moment, we're not. Far from it. But he's better within that team, scoring goals like Sunday.
No, Ben, we are not part of a European team. We don't want to be part of a European Union. We are British, proud, independent. We voted to take our country back. And your sector, maybe not your job, but your sector, Ben, I hope and pray, will benefit as time goes on. And who knows, maybe even between now and Christmas, Crystal Palace might win a couple of games. Ben, great call. Thank you. Do call again. Or someone there who is worried and whose job is moving. And, and I acknowledge this, that the big banks will relocate some people, but it's not going to happen on a vast scale because London is still the right place to be to do business. Not just British business, not just European business, but global business. And that has got to be London's future. Nigel, what is the point of saying X number of jobs could be lost? You could equally say they might not be lost. The bank just seems to be trying to put us off again, says Elaine. Well, Elaine, that to me is the major point of this debate, is I felt all through the referendum, and I feel now that the Bank of England appear to be behaving politically rather than purely economically. No, I don't believe they will lose loads of jobs. They just want to throw a spanner in the works. To hell with those Europhiles, and many other comments on Facebook and elsewhere that I'm afraid, because we're before the watershed, I'm not allowed to read out. There is not much support out there for the Bank of England. Please, if you're listening and you think the bank are right, they've always been right. They're great people. Call 0345 6060 973. Meanwhile, I'm going to ask Jay in Harpenden what he thinks.
Hi, Nigel. First and foremost, as a fellow Leaver or fellow Brexit supporter, I'd like to say that I'm very pleased to speak to you and I respect you greatly for giving the British people a voice.
Thank you.
And secondly, I work in the IT industry. I'm an engineer, and my employer has been a partner with a wealth management company for 15 years now. They're in the FTSE 100. I can't obviously mention names, for regulations, etc. But recently, especially in the last year, they work as partnership with their practices, and in the last year, they've seen the number of practices boost immensely. So even if, and this is an if because they say may, and scaremongering has been going on ever since the referendum came about. So even if 75,000 jobs are lost in London, we need to think about the thousands of jobs that are going to be created all around the UK. I understand there'll be a lot of families affected if, and if is a key word in this matter, if jobs are lost, but at the same time there'll be an awful lot of others that will benefit, and there'll always be an opportunity in the financial sector, not only in the wealth management business, but we've recently, within the last month or so, acquired an insurer, and that insurer has already purchased another company and are actively recruiting, which they are also part of the financial sector. So focusing in London might be a bit quite narrow-minded.
But it's a big sector, Jay. You make the point. You make the point beautifully that it's a big sector. It's about a lot more than banking, isn't it? There are lots and lots of other businesses out there. So, Jay, you're bullish and optimistic, yeah?
Absolutely. I think Brexit will actually be good. As you said, it will open our borders to the world, in the trading world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it will give us the opportunity to make our own trade deals.
Well, that's what I think, Jay. That's what I think too. Let's be upbeat. Let's be optimistic. Let's be happy. Let's look to the future and believe that we can do better than we are at the moment. And let's not listen to all the misery we're getting from the Ramonas and, sadly, still the Bank of England. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:46. Breaking news. Police are responding to the report of a shooting in Manhattan in New York. The New York Police Department have said on their Twitter feed that one person is being held in custody. More on that story with the LBC News at the top of the hour at 8 p.m. Back to the Bank of England. And is there doom-laden forecast that up to 75,000 jobs could be lost from the city because of Brexit? Do we actually believe it? Some people, of course, couldn't care less about this because they hate bankers. And anyone that works in financial services these days is called a banker, which is wrong. I couldn't care less if 75,000 bankers disappear, turn Canary Wharf into a residential city. I get on Twitter from someone embarking. Yeah, that's not the general view, I have to say, although bankers not particularly popular. Jamie is calling from Lampeter in Wales, a deeply rural location, as we discuss Threadneedle Street in the heart of the City of London. He's a new caller to LBC. Welcome, Jamie. Good evening.
Thank you, Nigel. It's wonderful to hear you being so optimistic. And, when I hear your boundless optimism and your hard work, I think it's just amazing that, all those times you stood for MP and the people didn't vote for you because you've got so much to offer. And
Jamie, that's a separate debate for a separate programme. But what's really interesting is that in 2014, under proportional representation, UKIP won the European elections. We came first. We beat Labour and the Conservative Party across the whole of the United Kingdom. But when you get to a first-past-the-post tribal election, I'm afraid people vote very differently indeed. Oh, I'm going to vote for this party because I hate the other party. And it's very, very difficult to break that two-party deadlock in British politics. And I think, Jamie, to be honest, our politics is much, much poorer because of it. Anyway, back to the Bank of England. Do you think Carney and the gang have got a point?
Well, obviously, the old establishment, trying to scaremonger, trying to frighten people, they can't accept the will of the people voting to leave. And it's wonderful you're standing up to them, because I think you're the loudest voice, Nigel.
Oh, that's really... that may not be a good thing, Jamie, but anyway.
It's a good thing, because, you're making the case for democracy. And, all this scaremongering, whenever it comes up, there'll be another one tomorrow. You're saying, look, we can survive this. Britain is strong. Britain is we're very competent. We're not going to be scared, and I think that's good. Somebody's hammering that message out.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, do you know what, Jamie? Whatever you do in life, if you haven't got optimism and energy, you've frankly got no hope of succeeding anyway. Whether it's playing sport, setting up a business, whatever it is, you've got to have those things. And I just feel there are so many in our establishment and in our big institutions who still have not reconciled themselves with the fact that Brexit has happened, and they're stuck in this sort of downward swirl of negativity. Jamie from Lampeter, thank you very much for your kindness and indeed for your call. Are all those experts really giving us their honest assessment of our prospects post-Brexit, or are they just lobbying for the interests of the pro-Remain institutions that employ them? He who pays the piper calls the tune, says a deeply cynical Mitch from North London. Probably got a point. On Twitter, Simon says to me, I met with a recruiter less than an hour ago. They told me they're hiring in London and it was running at fever pitch levels with no signs of stopping. Well, OK, we may get others who have a different view. Nigel, would the EU bail out RBS like we had to? Well, they've been very busy. They're good at bailouts, the EU. They've bailed out Greece 3 times, Portugal, Cyprus. Well, Cyprus actually was a bail-in, where actually what they just did was take all the investors' cash. No, I don't think they would really want to do that. I wonder what Frank in Kingston makes of this debate. Frank, good evening.
Yeah, hi there, good evening, and thanks for having me on the show.
Not a bit.
Just as a word of background, I'm a German national. I've been living in this country for 20 years, and I really love this country. I'm working here. I'm working for a big energy company and commodities trading.
Yep.
There are 2 points I want to make to you. One is about this continuous statements from politicians and also yourself that Brexit has already happened and nothing has happened to the economy. The point I would like to make there is that Brexit hasn't happened yet in terms of you still being in the EU. So the UK is currently still in the EU. So I would argue that Brexit has actually not been priced in yet properly. It's been priced into the exchange rate, into the FX rate, but it hasn't been priced in when you're talking at the company level. So effectively, companies need planability, they need certainty. And if there is a hard Brexit or a no-deal Brexit, contingency plans will kick in, just like in my company. And this will see that people will actually, this will effectively result in companies having to move or moving part of their staff. So that is a reality that we're currently facing.
All right, well, Frank, okay, I take the point. We haven't left yet, although, you know, the thought that it's not priced in surprises me because there's been so much talked about it. But look, I mean, how bad is this? How bad is this worst case scenario? You know, you and I, Frank, are running a company. We're manufacturing widgets and we're selling them into Germany. All right, for argument's sake, that's what we do. With Brexit, with a no-deal Brexit, those widgets are going to incur a tariff of what, Frank, 3%?
3% or even higher, but I think the
right,
main thing
okay, let's say 5%. Let's say 5%. But you know what, Frank? The fall in the pound, or in fact the monthly oscillation in the pound, is often more than 5%. So how scared would we really be of 5% going on our widgets?
Yeah, I understand your point from a manufacturing point of view, but I do think that the whole supply chain is put into question here, because if you're relying on German parts for example, building cars in this country, or if you build an air conditioning unit and you're relying on foreign parts, European parts that you have to import, it's going to have quite an effect on your business. But from a pure trading point of view, losing the financial passport to be, for example, we trade the European markets out of London. We trade, mainly Germany, for example, or the Netherlands, in commodities. That is really going to have an impact on us. So that's the point I tried to make there is that so far it's kind of wait and see. Companies are just trying to find out what is happening, and the contingency plans will kick in at the end of this year, early next year, if there is really a no-deal scenario.
So Frank, you're saying there are some big hurdles to overcome, and we haven't jumped them yet, yeah?
Correct.
Okay, that's a perfectly fair point. I thank you. I'm going to let you go because I'm running out of time. Frank's saying, look, it hasn't actually kicked in yet. The tough stuff is yet to come. And I listened very carefully to what he had to say. And I didn't disagree with him. No one said it was going to be straightforward and easy. There are adjustments and things that need to be done. We're making a fundamental change. My last caller, briefly this evening, is Patrick. He's a new caller from Epsom. Patrick, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. I had to call in after hearing that city worker phoning and lament about how his lifestyle was going to need to change based on Brexit. It incenses me. I would not even Mark Carney with predicting whether it's going to rain tomorrow or not. I've got to put about as much trust in our financial centre as we know what happens when business take a financial hit. The public take a financial hit. But you know what? We don't need Brexit for that. Just look at our energy companies. Our energy companies get our energy to us cheaper, but the bills stay the same.
Yeah.
Now, the changes in our bills for over the last, 10 years are ridiculous. These people are talking about 3%, 5%, 10%. What percentage of our bills changed in the last 10 years based on the effects of getting the energy to us in the first place?
Well, Patrick, 2020, 20% of your electricity bill will be subsidising green energy, and in many cases subsidising very rich landowners who don't need the money at all. Patrick, I thank you. He says that he trusts the Bank of England's prediction about as much as he trusts Mystic Meg. I just wish the Bank of England weren't being so overtly political, and that's where I'm upset with them. They've got things terribly wrong. Better they go a little bit quiet. That's at least my view on the subject. Great debate. Stay tuned to LBC for more news on the breaking story of a shooting in Lower Manhattan in New York. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7 o'clock. Coming up at 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.